Diddy is in serious trouble as shocking new audio leaks have surfaced, intensifying his already spiraling legal nightmare. The once untouchable music mogul is now facing an avalanche of damning evidence, and sources say he is in full panic mode. These leaked recordings are reportedly more incriminating than anything that has come before, painting a picture of a man whose empire is built on secrets and deception. The courtroom was left in stunned silence as prosecutors played the tapes, revealing conversations that could dismantle Diddy's defense entirely. These recordings don't just hint at wrongdoing, they allegedly contain direct admissions.
Diddy ringing in the new year with a jailhouse meltdown, at least according to some new reports. All this comes as the disgraced singer spends his first holiday season behind bars, and a judge rules one of his accusers can remain anonymous. By now you're well aware that 55-year-old Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He's facing federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The charges came down in September when a grand jury indicted Diddy, half a year after those federal raids were first performed on his homes. Since he was booked, Diddy has made several bids for bail, hoping to get back to one of those homes or an apartment on New York's Upper East Side. Just last month, Diddy's team officially put in its third attempt for his release, asking that he be put on house arrest. The defense originally wanted Diddy to be held on house arrest at his Star Island mansion in Miami, Florida, one of the places that was actually raided way back in March.
Insiders close to the case say this could be the final straw, the evidence that turns speculation into undeniable fact. First off, these audio leaks, what's being said is absolutely explosive. I'm talking about conversations that could completely change the narrative around some of the allegations that have been swirling for months. Without going into too much detail, let's just say the content is damning, and it's adding fuel to the fire of the ongoing investigations. People are speculating that this could be the smoking gun that prosecutors have been waiting for. For years, Diddy has portrayed himself as a savvy businessman, a cultural icon, a trailblazer in the music industry.
That bail would have come with a $50 million price tag and some major restrictions on Diddy's house arrest. Inside the apartment, there would be 2 live-in guards and another guard downstairs. Diddy wouldn't be allowed to access any phones or the internet unless it was used to contact his legal team. And on top of all of that, there would be a vetted list of people approved to visit Diddy, including his legal counsel and of course his family. Diddy's attorney Mark Agnifilo said there was a 0% chance that Diddy would be violent if he was released, and even called the bail package a, quote, very, very rigorous set of conditions. This part is wild. He said it was even more strict than the MDC jail. But Judge Subramanian, he didn't bite on that, and Diddy's bail was denied for the 3rd time. According to a report from the Daily Mail, that's why Diddy had a breakdown. A person close to him apparently said, quote, spending the holidays behind bars was a nightmare for him. If we're to believe all this, Diddy had a meltdown in his cell and begged the guards to take him to the hospital.
Behind closed doors, it appears he may have been orchestrating a far darker reality. The leaked audio reportedly includes interactions with former associates, some of whom have already distanced themselves from him. Now, faced with the weight of these revelations, many are speaking out, revealing details that had previously been buried under threats, power, and money. And speaking of investigations, the legal pressure is mounting like never before. Multiple lawsuits, federal probes, and now these leaks. It's a perfect storm of trouble for Diddy. Sources close to the situation are saying that his legal team is scrambling to contain the fallout.
Now, this is how the order begins. In connection with the Bureau of Prisons' October 28, 2024 to November 1, 2024 sweep of the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC, a BOP investigator, Investigator 1, photographed 19 pages of Combs' notes and sent them to the government's filter team. The filter team consists of AUSAs, these are Assistant United States Attorneys, who aren't involved in the investigation or prosecution of this case. The filter team redacted the notes and sent them to the case team. The case team consists of the agents and AUSAs investigating and prosecuting Combs. So let me start there. So yes, there was a raid at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, where currently Sean Combs is being locked up. Now, the government has always indicated that this raid was pre-planned, and it wasn't specifically about Sean Combs, whose unit was searched. Now, Combs' team has had a different take, which we'll get into a little bit more, But basically the idea is that this was a pretext to search Sean Combs' unit.
Social media is on fire with reactions to this explosive development. Fans who once idolized Diddy are now questioning everything. Is this the beginning of the end? Is justice finally catching up to one of the most powerful figures in the entertainment world? Or is there more to the story than meets the eye? The public is divided. Some still refuse to believe that the man who defined an era of music could be guilty of such serious allegations. Others, however, say they saw the warning signs long ago, and this is simply the long overdue reckoning.
So we're turning now to former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani to talk all things Diddy. Nima, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Of course, Sierra, thanks for having me as always.
Now, some of the reports are that P. Diddy had a breakdown or meltdown over the holidays when he is still at MDC behind bars. What do you make of those reports? Could he have had this meltdown?
I believe the reports, and obviously Diddy is someone who's rich and famous and has lived a life of luxury for many years, and now he's in federal prison during the holidays. So this isn't someone who's a hardened criminal who has spent a lot of time in custody. So the fact that he's spending Christmas and New Year's and future holidays in prison is probably finally getting to him. So I'm not surprised that he cracked.
You're right, it's definitely a change of tune from his lavish mansions and the holiday season to what he's experiencing right now. As far as the mental health side of things, I remember when Diddy was first arrested, he was put on suicide watch. So obviously keeping tabs on his mental health. Here in this instance, he apparently was asking for the guards to take him to the hospital so he could be treated there. Is this something that we're going to keep an eye on, Diddy's mental health behind bars?
The big question on everyone's mind is, how did these leaks even happen? Was it an inside job? A disgruntled employee? Or is this part of a larger effort to hold Diddy accountable for the allegations against him? Whatever the case, it's clear that someone out there is determined to bring everything to light, no matter how damaging it may be. Meanwhile, Diddy's legal team is scrambling. Insiders reveal that his lawyers are working overtime to suppress these recordings, claiming they were obtained illegally or taken out of context. But will that argument hold up in court? Legal experts believe that if these tapes are authenticated, they could be devastating, leaving little room for escape.
Combs has now filed a motion for an evidentiary hearing and other relief, arguing that the seizure of his notes violated the Fourth Amendment and that the government intentionally obtained his privileged communications in violation of the Sixth Amendment. So we'll start with the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And the argument would be this applies to detainees. They have a level of privacy too, that even in a jail or a detention center or prison, again, they have rights against warrantless searches unless there's some sort of legitimate security issue. The Sixth Amendment, which includes right to counsel, the idea here is that by taking notes that allegedly contained communications with attorneys and work product material, this unconstitutionally interferes with the attorney-client relationship. It invades the defense camp and may violate Combs' ability to defend himself. The argument is the government interfering can violate a defendant's right to effective assistance of counsel.
And if witnesses are willing to corroborate the details in these recordings, it could be game over. Diddy's downfall isn't just affecting him. It's sending shockwaves through the entire music industry. Executives, artists, and business partners who once stood beside him are now distancing themselves, erasing years of association with the mogul. The question now is, who knew what, and for how long? Did the industry turn a blind eye, allowing these alleged activities to continue unchecked?
In response to the motion, the government argues that there were no violations, but also that it won't offer as evidence the notes or any fruits of the notes. In a December 20th, 2024 ex parte letter, meaning it was filed only by the prosecution for the judge, but Subramanian acknowledges that the contents of which were later shared with the defense, the government outlined certain investigative steps taken upon receiving the notes, but it represented that it will not offer the evidence obtained pursuant to these investigative steps in the prosecution of the defendant, and that it intends to produce the evidence obtained from these steps to the defendant to the extent it has not already. Okay, so the prosecution is basically saying, we're not using what we found in this unit, and we turned over what we found to the defense. Now let's get into Subramanian addressing each of those defense arguments. Quote, "The first question is whether Investigator 1 violated Combs' Fourth Amendment rights when he searched Combs' cell and photographed the notes. The usual remedy for a Fourth Amendment violation is the suppression of evidence."
The floodgates are opening, and more revelations are expected in the coming weeks. And let's not forget the court of public opinion. Social media is going wild with reactions. Some people are saying this is long overdue, while others are defending Diddy, claiming he's being targeted. But with each new leak and legal filing, it's getting harder for even his most loyal fans to ignore the gravity of the situation. The latest reports indicate that federal investigators are closely analyzing the leaked audio, and there is talk of additional charges being filed.
An appellate court can only reverse a lower court's decision on bail if it's an abuse of discretion. So they really have to defer to that lower court. So the chances of the bail application being granted on appeal were less because of the different standard. And also, we know the application has gotten worse because of Diddy's own conduct while he's in prison. We've talked about how he's used other inmates' pack numbers and he's made these three-way calls allegedly, trying to intimidate witnesses. So not only do you have the bail denied because he's a risk of flight or danger to the community, but also because he's trying to obstruct justice and affect the integrity of the proceedings.
A lot going on even behind bars for Diddy. I know we talked, you and I believe, about those allegations that he was using other inmates' phone calls or their lines, you just mentioned it, to talk about things so that prosecutors couldn't listen in. I'm sure that federal prosecutors are still keeping a very close eye on P. Diddy, his communication with the outside world, as it were. Do you think they're going to use any of this information at the coming trial?
I do, because if you're a prosecutor, you have to anticipate the defense in the case. And the defense in this case is clear that the sexual contact happened, but it was consensual. So Diddy's defense team is going to do everything they can to convince the jury that even though the freak-offs happened, these were consensual sexual acts by adults.
Diddy's inner circle is reportedly falling apart, with key figures either flipping or going completely silent. Could this be a sign that even those closest to him are losing faith? Sources suggest that some of Diddy's longtime allies are cooperating with authorities, providing even more damaging information that could seal his fate. So, where does this leave Diddy? Honestly, it's hard to say. If these leaks are as bad as they seem, and if the legal cases continue to pile up, we could be looking at a complete downfall.
Going to be huge, something we've talked about, and it's really highly anticipated because they're the ones who were victims in this situation. Is the defense really going to attack that? The fact that these people are bearing all, it's probably going to be very emotional for them or very difficult to talk about on a public stage. Do you think that's something that the defense is really going to focus on?
I think so. We know, at least in the civil complaints, one of the defense strategies has been to out the victim. Some of them want to remain anonymous, right? And the defense in almost every case has filed a motion to unmask the identity of the accusers because they think on the defense side that maybe people will be more hesitant to come and talk about their sexual assault or sexual abuse at a very public trial. And it's hard for victims of abuse. So I do think the defense is banking on that. And we know that some of these acts happened years, sometimes even decades ago. So they're going to point out inconsistencies in any statements that they're making and argue that this shows that they're lying. And we've already seen it with a couple of the victims who have given statements already to the media. One was an interview with CNN. Another victim gave an interview with NBC. That victim, of course, being the Alabama woman who accused both Diddy and Jay-Z.
This could very well be the beginning of the end for one of the most iconic figures in the music industry. This isn't just about legal trouble. This is about legacy. Diddy built an empire, a brand synonymous with success, wealth, and influence. But if these allegations hold up in court, that legacy could be shattered beyond repair. Could the man who once stood at the top of the music industry end up behind bars? It's a shocking possibility, one that seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. But now, with mounting evidence and a growing list of accusations, it's becoming more.
Subramanian says all of this is moot because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter because the prosecution agreed not to use the notes in their case or anything that came from the notes, fruit of the poisonous tree, or any evidence that came from an investigation based on the notes. They will not use any of this in their case in chief. But Subramanian did advise that if the government later tries to use evidence that it promised not to use, then Combs' defense attorneys can make an objection and they can argue a Fourth Amendment violation. But for right now, basically, nothing more to do. So now you move on to the alleged Sixth Amendment violations. Subramanian writes, relief may be warranted under the Sixth Amendment where the government intentionally seeks to obtain a defendant's privileged communications to interfere with the attorney-client relationship. There are two questions that matter here. Did the government intentionally invade Combs' relationship with his counsel? If so,
what do you think about all of this? Are these leaks the final nail in the coffin? Or is there still a chance for Diddy to turn things around? Let me know your thoughts, because this story is far from over, and I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more in the coming days. Diddy's response has been carefully calculated, with statements from his legal team dismissing the allegations as baseless and calling the leaked audio a smear campaign. But the court of public opinion is already shifting, and every new piece of evidence is making it harder for him to maintain his innocence. The reality is that perception matters, and once that perception shifts, there may be no coming back. Now, let's talk about the legal side of things because it's not looking good. The pressure on Diddy is mounting like never before.
Under the circumstances here, assuming without concluding that a portion of the unredacted notes was privileged, there are no grounds for relief. Okay, why? Well, first, Judge Subramanian concludes that the government didn't intentionally invade Combs' privilege. Quote, it is undisputed that the photographed notepads were separate and apart from a manila folder that was clearly marked legal. Investigator 1 didn't search that folder. While Combs initially told the court that the photographed notepads were marked legal as well, the defense retreated from this position when confusion developed over when the handwritten legal labels had been added to the notepads. That's true, I remember that. We covered this court hearing live on Law and Crime's YouTube channel, and as we were getting updates from the court, since there were no cameras, I remember one of the updates was that Subramanian seemed kind of miffed at the defense for not knowing what and when something was marked as legal, and he was kind of scolding the defense about that. Don't make any, statements to the court that aren't accurate.
We've got multiple lawsuits, federal investigations, and now these leaks. It's a perfect storm of trouble. Sources close to the situation are saying that Diddy's legal team is working around the clock to contain the fallout. But with every new development, it's becoming clearer that this is an uphill battle. As more recordings come to light, one has to wonder, how deep does this go? Are we only scratching the surface of what has truly been happening behind closed doors? Insiders say that law enforcement officials are now receiving tips from people who were once too afraid to speak out.
So here's what we know about the timeline up to now. So multiple documentaries and TV specials have already been released about Combs and the investigation into him by the Southern District of New York. Allegations against Combs really got rolling in November of 2023 when his ex, Cassandra Ventura, filed a massive lawsuit that accused him of forcing her to perform sex acts with commercial sex workers during their alleged abusive relationship. Combs settled that lawsuit with Cassandra Ventura the next day, but never really admitted to any wrongdoing per se. He did issue an apology on Instagram a few days after a tape was published by CNN of him purportedly kicking, hitting, dragging Ventura in a hotel hallway back in 2016. But other than that, he has denied all allegations against him. And when I say that, I mean there are more civil complaints than you can even count that were filed against him. And in March of 2024, investigators with the Department of Homeland Security, they raided Combs' two houses in Los Angeles and Miami, bringing out boxes and boxes of evidence. At the time, he wasn't charged yet, but then he got charged months later in September. Grand jury indicted him on 3 federal charges: racketeering conspiracy.
The power dynamic is shifting, and for the first time in decades, Diddy is no longer untouchable. And let's not forget, these aren't just civil cases we're talking about. There are criminal investigations in the mix, and if these leaks are as bad as they seem, they could give prosecutors exactly what they need to move forward with charges. We're talking about potential consequences that go beyond just financial penalties or reputational damage. This could be life-altering. His financial empire is also taking a hit. Reports suggest that several major business deals are now in jeopardy, with companies reconsidering their partnerships in light of the scandal. When allegations of this magnitude surface, corporations act fast to protect their brands.
His power, his influence, and intimidation to run a criminal enterprise, which involved him allegedly forcing people around him to have sex with commercial sex workers, sometimes with him participating. Now, Ventura is believed to be victim one in the indictment, and a lot of what the government alleges ended up matching with a lot of what was in her lawsuit. Combs, as we know, was arrested in New York. He was taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where he's been ever since. He's been denied bond on 3 separate occasions by 3 different judges. But, to be clear, right, he's innocent until proven guilty. This does not override his constitutional right to a fair trial. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty. He is scheduled to go to trial in federal court in May. Cameras aren't allowed, but we're going to be in the courtroom. We're going to be doing our best to bring you live updates as it happens. We have some interesting ways we might do that. But look, the reason I say he's entitled to a fair trial is because that's one of the main issues he brings up with this lawsuit. And I'll get to that. But unless something is revealed in pretrial motions, like we're expecting, the prosecution may file an enterprise letter that would reveal more details about the racketeering charge. Unless they file that or something else, we likely won't know what evidence the government has to prove their case until that evidence is actually coming up in court.
Could this mean the collapse of Diddy's billion-dollar empire? If these legal troubles continue, it's entirely possible. The next steps in this case will be critical. Will more whistleblowers come forward? Will the leaked audio lead to further investigations, possibly even new charges? And most importantly, how will Diddy navigate this crisis? Every move he makes from this point forward will be under a microscope, and any misstep could accelerate his downfall. This is a moment unlike any other in the entertainment industry. A once invincible icon is now facing a reckoning that could change.
Okay, so with all that in mind, now let's talk about the lawsuit that Combs has filed against NBC Universal. Also, by the way, you're going to be hearing about Ample Entertainment. That's the company that produced the documentary. They are a defendant too in this case. The complaint reads, for nearly a century, NBC has been a trusted name in news, a leader in broadcasting important stories to citizens who depend on reputable media to stay informed. And then he makes the allegation that they grossly exploited this trust and shamelessly capitalized on the public's insatiable appetite for content about Mr. Combs in the lead up to his criminal trial. Defendants made a conscious decision to line their own pockets at the expense of truth, decency, and basic standards of professional journalism. In January 2025, racing to outdo the competition for the most salacious Diddy expose, defendants maliciously and recklessly broadcast an outrageous set of fresh lies and conspiracy theories in a purported documentary they called Diddy, the Making of a Bad Boy. And the suit goes on to say that Combs, quote, emphatically and unequivocally denies the charges against him and is preparing to contest the government's evidence, such as it is, at trial beginning on May 5th, 2025. Mr. Combs has faith in the integrity of the judicial system and is confident the jury will acquit him.
As this legal nightmare intensifies, the world is watching. Will Diddy fight back and prove his innocence? Or will these shocking new leaks mark the end of an era? One thing is certain. This story is far from over, and the truth is coming whether Diddy is ready for it or not. The pressure is mounting, and as investigators dig deeper, more evidence could emerge that solidifies Diddy's fate. His inner circle continues to shrink, and those who once remained silent are beginning to speak out. This is not just another celebrity scandal. This is a moment that could redefine the power dynamics of the music industry.
After Combs had been behind bars a few months, apparently his team got word that Ample Entertainment was working on this piece, this documentary, because it says, in or around December 10th, 2024, defendant Ample informed Mr. Combs' representatives that it was producing a documentary, not about the government's allegations against him, but rather regarding distinct allegations, including theories of his involvement in the deaths of Kim Porter and Christopher Wallace, and allegations of sex with underage girls. First, have to mention this. None of that appears to be part of the criminal case against him, okay? Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, Notorious B.I.G., Combs' artist, his friend who was gunned down in 1997 in LA. Kim Porter, Combs' girlfriend, mother of 3 of his children who died in 2018 in her home from what authorities confirm was lobar pneumonia. We do not believe any of that will come into his trial. He is not and has never been charged in connection with anything to do with their death.
These recordings truly contain the damning admissions they are rumored to. Diddy's empire could crumble faster than anyone anticipated. Legal analysts predict that if convicted, the consequences could be severe, potentially including significant prison time. The weight of these allegations is too heavy to ignore, and every development only adds to the gravity of the situation. With the legal battle heating up, there is no telling how this will end. Will new revelations completely destroy Diddy's reputation? Will more former allies turn against him? Or will he somehow manage to escape the storm that seems to be closing in on him? Whatever happens, one thing is clear. The days of Diddy being untouchable are officially over. The truth is unraveling, and the world is watching every second of it.